So inductive research is you approach a problem and you don't have a hypothesis. And what you're doing is you're trying to understand the problem without testing your hypothesis. So basically what you're doing is you go out and do research, and you would code that research, and you try to find trends within the data you're getting out of your research. And then that's what you start to create your problem definition from. The other way that this is suggesting is deductive research, where you start with a hypothesis. So let's say AIDS is prevalent in this community. You would go out and then you would do some sort of research to verify that hypothesis, right? So most of the time, or a lot of the time when we have a program, it's based off of some assumption that somebody has made. It's usually your manager. They have some idea in their head that this problem exists, but we haven't usually gone out to verify that. So all we're doing for assessing a program is the scientific method. We're just verifying our hypothesis that it's correct. Does that help at all? Ground it? Okay. So another thing I talked about, that problems aren't an objective phenomena, is depending on who's looking at the problem, it's only a problem if we say it's a problem, right? So your boss, you may see a problem, and if we take it out of the realm of like really intense things, like is dying from AIDS a problem? Like most people would agree that that's a problem. But let's say something more mundane. I'm sure you all have experiences at work where you think something is a problem, but your coworkers or your manager doesn't think it's a problem, right? And that's what I'm talking about. They're not objective. It's often somebody is determining that it's a problem, right? And so this is important when doing your needs assessment, because you need to get everybody on board while you're testing your hypothesis, and once you've actually your research, you need to make sure everybody's on board and everybody agrees that the problem you have defined is actually a problem. And that's really important for getting funding for research, right? So for example, I had to go into my boss today and ask him for money to do research about citizen engagement. And I've spent the past, say, 2-3 months convincing him that the citizen engagement that we're doing in our department in the city is terrible, right? And so it's a long game. Like I didn't start out by asking him for money. I started out by building a case that there's probably a problem here, and we need to do research to make sure that to understand what that problem is, the scope of the problem, right? So we need to be somewhat political in how we're approaching research. And I guess the good part of the story is that he agreed to give me funding to do the research. So, I mean, huge, and I've talked a lot about this. I wish there was a class where, and maybe that's sort of what your leadership classes are, but I wish there was a class that taught you how to do the research and then taught you the political side of the research, or the political side of getting these kinds of things done. I think it's hugely important. So, like I've been saying, your bosses, your managers, they're going to try to define the problem, and your job as a program evaluator is to question those assumptions. Research. So I hope coming out of this program or coming out of this class that you'll be a little bit more skeptical of claims that people make. That's sort of been my goal. Maybe you already were, so it's great. But yeah, questioning things, I think that's really important. So if you want to think about a needs assessment, these are basically the big questions you're trying to answer: when, where, and how big. right? So when could be, if you're talking about crime, when is it happening? Is it happening at night? Is it happening early in the morning? Where is it happening? How big is the problem? Is it everybody in a whole neighborhood? Is it just a few key actors? So, for example, during the crack epidemic in the 1990s, there was some research done, and they found that that there was actually just a few people. There was just a few people doing most of the crime, so selling most of the drugs and killing most of the people. And what you could call that in statistics is the power law distribution. So a lot of problems. So if these are your axes, let's say this is the prevalence. Is that right? Oh yeah, so, okay, sorry. This is the number of people. And this is the frequency with which a certain crime is happening. So it's, in a lot of cases, it's actually a few people who are causing a lot of the problems. So for example, in people who are experiencing homelessness, a lot of times you'll find that there is one or two people who are going into the hospital all the time, and it's costing the state tons of money. And so instead of creating a program, and you would understand this through a needs assessment, instead of creating a program that tries to help all homeless people, maybe you create a program that helps 2 people or 3 people. There was this one guy, I think he was in like Nevada, and he was costing Nevada millions of dollars. And so they put him up in a house and they paid all of his bills because it was cheaper for them. And that's sort of what Utah is doing now, is they're finding it's cheaper to just put people in housing, right? So yeah, that's power law distribution. And you'll actually see these a lot, because oftentimes we think it's more like this. The problem is more like this, but it's not. It's often like that. You just have a few people. So my point in sort of going on this rant is you need to understand how big the problem is, because it can be much cheaper for you to address the problem if you understand it, if you understand the scope of the project, right? Or the scope of the problem. So.
How do you evaluate when you roll out of this homeless shelter problem? So like, I mean, from your outside perspective looking in, and anybody's going to get, it seems like a disaster because they're just throwing things, right?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about it because I haven't really been following it, but maybe you could give us an overview.
The technical term is dumpster.
Yeah, that's my fire.
It's a dumpster fire. Well, do you think part of the problem is that this, like going through this whole process, hasn't been a component of creating this program, or?
I can probably speak to that.
I can't.
It's not an easy program. It's not an easy problem to solve. And it's not like unique to Salt Lake. I mean, you go to like Portland and Seattle, and it's like, you know, this situation times like 100. It's just, there's not a good solution, because like a lot of the root cause of the problem is like, it's hard to solution. So it's like, so it's hard to develop a program that, like, I mean, all you can do is like minimize impact. And then you're asking like, okay, do I minimize impact to the individual? Do I minimize impact to the society? And it's just not a good solution.
And I think to get nuance in the research that we're doing, I'm a big advocate for doing like a cyclical program. So basically where you're going through. So this kind of suggests, and maybe I should have shown it as a cyclical process, but this kind of shows that you just go through the process and you're good to go. And you've got a perfect program, which maybe they did go through this whole process. But what we should constantly be doing is assessing what we're doing, right? And everything should be feeding into what we did before. And so it's always building up on each other. Oftentimes, So some of the good startups are really good at this, where they'll do A/B testing, right? Where treatment groups, so they'll have a website. Let's say the startup has a website, and for that website, they will do two different versions of it. So one is their control, so that's the website as the status quo, and then one is the treatment, which is your B test, and that's going to have some sort of change. And then what you would do is you would put out these two versions of the website, and then you'd assess how people are engaging with that website. So if your goal is to increase sales, you would look at, does this second website increase the sales, whatever change you made to it, right? So what you're going to be doing is you would do that test. So let's say this is test 1, and then you would pivot accordingly. So let's say you find out that the website didn't improve your sales by making that change. So then you'd create a different change, and you test that. Then you go to 3, and you just keep doing that, and you keep pivoting. And that's the same way with our research, is we want to keep pivoting, we want to keep doing research, we want to keep doing changes. It's that sort of that lean model, right?
So, okay, with the homeless issue, the county actually did a really good job of going through doing the program. I guess they did the program there. They said, how is it working? What do we need to do to improve it? They've got the data that backs up the new model that they're trying to push. But then things get squirrely once you bring the public into it, in terms of, we're gonna put one of these in your neighborhood. We promise it's not gonna be like the Rio Grande. But when everybody looks at that as the current model, nobody can really envision anything different,
So
Do you think it would have been better if they tried just one community and like modeled it and then said, this is what it could look like for another community?
Yeah.
So then there wasn't the fear? I mean, just a question.
No, I totally agree. I mean, we, the county, always point to other shelter type facilities like the YWCA. There's some other detox facilities, VOA, First Step House, that have what they plan to be doing, where they are working. They integrate well within the neighborhood. But that doesn't matter. Once somebody says you're going to have a homeless resource center within 2 blocks of your house, all the facts on the data just fly out.
So the concept you just described, what I call it, I guess in my jargon or whatever, it's like the nail it and scale it model. So too often, and there's actually a book that's called Nail It and Scale It. But the idea is that you start out and you test your model, and if it works, then you scale it. Because too often, like you see this in the national government a lot, right? Where, so for example, Obamacare, they, instead of, let's say, testing it in a single state or testing it in a single county, they just country. And so there was all these problems with it, right? And so like one of the big problems is it doesn't actually make healthcare necessarily cheaper. It just got everybody onto insurance, right? So if they had tested this first, maybe that they could have worked out those kinks instead of country.
And couldn't they have done that because Massachusetts already had a model?
Mm-hmm.
So many states already had a model of healthcare and how it worked or didn't work. That instead of doing that, but it's the same problem again. It's been what, I don't know how many years, but no one is willing to look at the beta tests or, like you're saying, those and scale them. They just want to recreate and start fresh.
And but there's also this problem. So you talked about the political problem that we're running into, and there's the problem that if you do it that way, people might say, well, why aren't we getting it? We need it, right? And then you run into this whole problem. But you're talking about something that's really important that I've been putting a lot of effort into. Okay, so basically I'm doing the public works sort of branding thing. And when I say branding, I'm not talking about like our logo, I'm talking about how people perceive. And so what I'm doing is basically a needs assessment for So I wanted to walk you through some of my research, or the research model that I'm using. But basically, what I've been arguing is that in order for your programs to succeed, you need to understand how the public is going to react to that, which you've been saying is a problem in the homelessness program that they've created. So basically what I've started doing is, let's say you have a normal distribution, and on this end, you have people who hate government.
Draper.
Let's say on this end, you have people who love government. So, and then in the middle, right, you have your average human being. So there's a certain model or way of thinking where you go to extreme users. So anybody who is showing up to your city council meetings is an extreme user, right? Because they're not a normal person. Like normal people do not go to city council meetings. Like council meetings pretty frequently back in the day, and I was not normal. Maybe I'm still not. But the idea there is that these people right here have non-attitudes. Like they don't care about it. And so they can't articulate themselves, like what the problem is. Or maybe they do have some frustrations, but it's not like that big of a deal for them. So what I'm doing in this public works, right? Most people, if you ask them about public works, they're going to be like, I don't even know what that is, right? So what I'm doing is I'm finding people, neighborhood chairs, people like that, who are extreme users. And so you're going to find people who hate government, and you're going to find people who love government or love at least some of the things we're doing. And that's how I'm getting insights. And then, so what group did service design? Did you do service design?
What was that?
Did you do the service design? Yeah. So in service design, right, you have personas. So something I'm doing, so I'm going to talk to these extreme users, and then from these extreme users, I'm going to create personas.
So like the profile of the person.
Exactly. So let's say, okay, this guy is named Bob. He's just got one smaller eye, you know? Or a monocle.
A monocle.
Okay. So Bob, let's say Bob is blue collar, or maybe he's white collar because he has a monocle and cane. Okay, he's white collar.
Oh, it's and a cane. It's a lovely guy.
Yeah. So let's say Bob is white collar, how his taxes are used. And we found that in talking to these extreme users, at least 25% of the people we talk to are like Bob. They're white collar tax haters. And so what we can do is, since we've created this persona, we can go out and find people within the community that maybe are more normal people that fit that profile. And then my plan is to hold focus groups with people that are representative of these personas, but are normal people, right? And so the whole point of doing this, and I could go through this in an iterative way, so I could do this multiple times. And the point of doing this, and I'm a big advocate for, is that our research should always be building on to our previous research. So often, for example, in a master plan that we hired some consultants for, they did a survey, and then they did a public scoping meeting, and they had all this research that was done in this public scoping meeting. They had all this research that was done in this survey, and maybe they went and talked to people at city council meetings. So let's say they did some interviews, but none of it is connected to each other. So it's like, what's the point of doing all of this research? And it's pretty clear in their master plan that shallow understanding of the problem. But instead, if you can connect this, so let's say you start out with a public scoping meeting, and that informs the questions that you create for your survey. And then the survey creates the questions that you ask at the city council meetings. And what you're doing is, if this is your problem, it's like an iceberg or whatever, it's basically you're starting to understand more of the problem as you build into it. So it's that would be an example of inductive research, right? Or you could even do it deductively, where you're just constantly testing your hypotheses, which is what we've talked about here. Or you can do it inductively, where you're just getting more and more information and you're building up your understanding, and you're not actually going in there with any sort of agenda, or you're not necessarily testing anything. You're just getting more and more information so you understand the problem.
Public scoping meeting.
Okay, so sorry, a public scoping meeting is just their jargon for it, but basically what they did is they showed people a bunch of pictures and they asked them to rate them. So it was for the Parks Master Plan. So an example would be they'd show a picture of some people cycling, and then they'd show on a dirt road, and then they'd show a picture of people cycling on on asphalt, right? And so the idea is that you're understanding, do people have preferences for asphalt or dirt paths? Like, where should we put our resources? But the problem is, for example, one of the top things that they found, one of the the number one picture was an eagle in a tree.
Freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what does this mean?
How do you account for independent variables? You know, are they the same two people on the same bikes on the, you know, just on one on road and one on gravel? Because, you know, they could have a stupid expression on their face and people will stop voting for it. I mean, how can you even be?
Exactly. So you pointed out a good problem that we're running into. So there's that problem that you're talking about. And then there's this problem of the eagle, where we just don't know what the eagle means, but everybody loves the eagle. And so both of these problems can be understood.
You can put plastic eagles in trees and more.
Did you know there's a park in Orem, I think, that there's eagles up in the trees, and you can't do anything about it because they're protected, but they swoop down and peck at people.
Have that on campus for a bit.
Freedom.
But
They had a hawk on view where you can have.
Yeah, they had to put a sign.
yeah,
You couldn't do anything to protect wildlife, so we
They
had
had
to
to put a
just like
sign up.
put signs up so people couldn't walk there.
yeah, it's crazy. Like,
BB gun in 5 minutes, that's all.
oh man. All right, so back to my eagle.
Absolute paracrims, absolute.
So what they could have done was,
Absolute
everybody loves the
paracrims.
eagle. We don't know why they love the eagle. And in the master plan, it doesn't say anything about the eagle, but everybody loved the eagle because they don't understand the eagle. So why didn't they?
Why was there a picture of an eagle?
I don't know. That's the other thing. Why did they put it in there? Probably no reason. They just threw it in there. Fair enough. Should be a little bit more kind. But what they should have done was, after that public scoping meeting, they should have gone out and done some interviews with people. They could have even done it in the public scoping meeting, to understand this iceberg, or to drill down and understand what the eagle means. Or let's say that it looks like most people like asphalt roads, like to ride their bikes on asphalt roads as opposed to dirt roads. Know that it was because the guy had a stupid look on his face, unless we go and talk to people more, right? Because then you might show you might do another public scoping meeting, and here's the other thing, you want to do it on an iterative basis, right? So you might do a public scoping meeting with pictures with the same ideas, and then you're sort of dealing with that problem because you're maybe you can verify the research that you've already done.
But just listening to this, the purpose in doing this branding is it's to see how many Form City residents understand what Public Works does.
Okay, exactly. So, sorry, I got off on a tangent.
You can have all the pictures in the
So the
world up there, but if you're not asking the right questions.
yeah, so this stuff was for the Parks Master Plan. This isn't part of my research, right? Sorry, so I got off on a tangent, but yeah, so I'm gonna get to that. But question?
Yeah, I was gonna say, why use the pictures? Why not just say, have 10 different things here and say, is asphalt or dirt roads more important to you, or is parks or swimming pools more important to you, or, I mean, is there a reason why pictures bring out people's inner feelings when they see an eagle or something, or what's?
I'm not advocating necessarily for pictures or words, but
I mean, give them 10 things, I'm rank them, 1 to 10, what's the most important?
you can do that, but what this does is it anchors the answers to something. For example, I was working with the city planners because they just wanted me to come help them with some citizen engagement stuff they're doing. And they had a talking about like rank the following things. And one of the things they had on there was what did they call it? Basically like protected sidewalks, but they had some like super technical term for it, where it would have you'd have trees lining in like along the road. Buffered sidewalks is what they call it. And so for me, I'm like, what does that mean, right? Like I know what it means, but really most people don't know what that means. So actually having a picture associated with it, right? And that's one of the problems is oftentimes, and that's a problem with surveys, is we're asking questions about things people don't know anything about. Attitudes. So we need to make sure that we're anchoring the responses to something. Okay, so back to your question, why are we doing for the needs assessment for the branding project, right? So it could be so remember when, where, and how big, right? So it could be, if we go back to this, that it's really only the people who, because the whole point of this is whenever we put out fees, right, for public works, we get this horde of people at the city council meetings, like looking for blood. And so the city council thinks that hates public works or hates having running water, or probably more like hates fees. But it really could be that it's really just these people, and that these people don't care. And so when, where, how big, when, maybe the answer is just at city council meetings or when you put out a fee, or the when could be always, they always hate government. Could be that all of these people hate government. And so eventually, after I've done all of this research and I've done like focus groups and things like that, I'm going to put out a survey, which if it's done properly, right, it's actually going to be representative of the community. And so I can ask questions in that survey that have been informed by all this research prior to that. And so I can ask questions that I know are about serious sort of sticking points. And so I'm trying to understand where in this whole distribution is the problem. Is it just right here? Or is it, or, right? You're just trying to understand the scope of that problem. And that's, and in order for me to create a program, I need to understand that, because otherwise I'm creating a program that is addressing a problem that I don't understand. And it could be that we just need to create a program for 10 very influential people in the community. We need to have some sort of outreach to those people. Or could be that we need to do a major campaign, right? So we don't want to just blow our money on a whim or some sort of like gut feeling you have. Questions? Concerns?
Since I got this homeless situation, and I've kind of been following it somewhat, and last night I saw some of this rover diatribe, you know.
Are they like doing the,
Oh, yeah, just some ballistic over there, and kind of discussing, I thought, but I just wonder if it was just,
I love that you said that under your breath kind of, but keep going.
what was that? Disgusting, kind of?
Yeah.
Well, it was disgusting, not kind of, it was just blatantly disgusting, but I think that, to me it was anyway, not as my perspective, but I just wondered if it was just poor assessment by, you know, the various, you know, governmental agencies and organizations, that they didn't already have that, the public outrage, you know. I can't imagine they wouldn't realize there's gonna be public outrage no matter where they were, and extent. Or another thing that I've kind of been perplexed at a little bit is just how quick the politicians seem to be ready to let just the people at these, you know, few meetings they've had and stuff, change their whole decision. They, you know, the decisions they made or the options out there, and have such a big influence on them. It seems to me that they would, knowing that that's going to happen, they would try to do some kind of surveys of the population in those areas, and not just let 700 people that show up to a meeting, entire city or county or whatever it is.
Just such a small percentage, right?
Such a small percentage, and if that happens, then it's just, you know, 1% or less of the, far less than 1% probably the population speaking and making decisions for the whole group.
So one of the problems you have,
I wonder if it's a funding thing or.
Well, and that one, I'm just reading on it, like, I think that's part of the qualities that they do. So I think that was just an idea that the mayor, maybe a few slides.
Yeah, that was right.
Proposed it. And like,
but
I'd be interested to see, I mean, I think if they did survey all of Draper, they probably would get a different result than from the sun.
I don't know though, because I read a lot of comments, probably, I don't know, 30 comments, SL piece, and I was surprised, not really surprised, I guess, but there was a high percentage of responders, responses from citizens of Draper, at least they said they were just appalled by that action, you know, and by the crowd, and others pointed out the fact that it's not going to be near housing, you know, residential areas and things like that. And so I just wondered if it just wasn't poorly planned out and poorly executed type thing.
Well, some of this is really comes down to when Speaker Hughes was talking to us about that, he had put the timetables, he put the pressure on the city and the county to make a decision because of the funding.
Batting it back and forth.
Right, so some of that is the behind the scenes political pressure that they can't talk about.
Right.
The next step is they made the selections of these locations. Instead of doing what they did with the prison, where they took a year or so to assess those locations, the public, we all hate to be told where things are going without having any feedback or without having any ability to give feedback. So they made these decisions of these locations, and then you can see why people, you know, like Draper City, did they talk to their constituents at those locations? I bet you they did. So that's the first reaction. It's a normal human reaction. When people hear things like this at the very first, they immediately go to resisting. And they don't get the education. And then you see this type of stuff happening because, and this is what helps create the distrust in government, is because of that.
And the other problem at the root of all of that is that, so you have this scale that is basically at the bottom of citizen engagement, you have token efforts, which I'd say 90% of what we see are token efforts. And then at the very top, you have very meaningful citizen engagement. And what you normally see is everybody's invited to these events. They're dependent on themselves to figure out the issues, and they're just there listening. Maybe they can express their preferences, right? But if this is called the democracy cube, and there's all these other options and all these different ways that you can mix and match citizen engagement, and nobody, can't say nobody, but the vast majority of citizen engagement doesn't take into consideration that you can have different manifestations of citizen engagement. It doesn't have to be the city hall meeting.
But even if they call a meeting, it's token. About a month ago, I got a little card in the mail saying we're having a neighborhood meeting for these 3 different neighborhood regions in your area, and you're a resident of that one of those neighborhoods. And so it's going to be at this place a week from today. Basically, it's about a week out. And, so come if you want to. We're going to talk about things that are going to affect your neighborhood and things by the city. And so it was on Thursday night, of course, and so I sent fired an email back and just said, can you please, and it mentioned that there'd been a bunch of meetings. I never heard of any. And by different people in the community and things, that they figured out this plan and stuff. And so I shot an email back to this person at Orange City, and I said, can you please send me the minutes of the meeting and the agenda for this coming meeting? Copy the agenda. And this person wrote back and emailed me back and said, I'm sorry, I can't send you anything because it's not finalized. And I said, can you just tell me what it's about? And he said, well, so he sent me this link to miles away that similar thing they're looking at, but I didn't really feel comfortable with that, so I just sent back another email just saying, provide a few names of my neighbors he mentioned in the card to, that have been involved in these meetings, and I never got a response, and so it seemed really suspicious to me. I haven't been able to find out what happened in that meeting, what it was all about, if they're going to rezone my neighborhood and make it all commercial. I don't know. I mean, they can do anything, so put a big tent church there or something. I don't know.
Well, I think one of the problems is that a lot of the times, and when I say it's a token effort, it's a marketing effort from the city to the city council. Get to cross off the box, and then
that's what I feel like.
And then within the group, and this doesn't just happen at the city level, it happens at all levels. And then within the whole decision-making process, the city employees are going to pick and choose the decisions that best represent their own views, right?
Right.
And that's what I'm getting at, is there's all these different ways. Like, for example, in South America or even in France now, this whole public budgeting process where the citizens actually come up with the budget. And you may think that's crazy, but it works. And so it's actually down here as opposed to right here, where they're actually making the decisions. Actually gave people meaningful responsibility within these processes, then you'd find out that people actually do care. But when you're always doing this stuff out here where everybody can participate and nothing they do matters, then people aren't going to care, and you're just going to have a junk process, right? So I'm just saying, like, we need to be more purposeful in the stuff we're doing and not just doing it because that's how we've always done it.
That's totally the feeling I got, was just to check off the shit, say, so when the next
it definitely
comes up in my neighborhood, and get upset or somebody gets upset, they can say, well, you know, we had these meetings and I sent you this card and you didn't show up or whatever, you know, that's kind of the feeling I get.
And that's exactly what they will say.
I anticipate they'll say.
Yeah.
So whatever solution you come up with, you have to keep in mind it has to be adaptable. Because the way people respond, the way that they interact, the way that they will engage over time changes. And so we, you know, letting them set the budget that may work for the next decade, and then if things change, doesn't work anymore, we have to be open to looking at new solutions instead of.
Yeah.
But it was working.
And that's sort of the problem is like, I bet you a lot of this, well, that's what was happening back in the 60s. Everybody was talking about how citizen engagement needed to happen. So they created these models that we still use 57 years later that don't work anymore. It's exactly what you're talking about and how we need to be very purposeful in our citizen engagement. And we're sort of getting off on a tangent, but I guess it all leads back to need to be purposeful in the things that we're doing. So if we know that we have this problem with this whole homeless program, then we probably should go through this whole process where we're understanding the problem and then creating citizen engagement efforts based off of our understanding of the problem, not just these sort of canned processes that we always do. Okay, questions?
What was this called again?
Democracy Cube. So it's by
Cube or
Cube. Yeah, CUBE. It's by this guy Archon Fung, ARCHONFUNG. So the actual paper that it's out of is really good. It's called Varieties of Public Participation, I believe. But yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
So question about that. Call me crazy, but I'd rather go fishing than spend all night going through Saratoga's budget and then voting on it. I'd rather hire experts. But you're saying the movement is to go to a democracy level?
Not necessarily.
I don't want to vote on it. I vote on someone that I trust.
Yeah, and definitely if that's why I'm saying we do a needs assessment to understand go fishing, and they would rather just hand the baton off to the technical individuals, then yeah, that's what we do. But if we find that people are angry with how government is running, then we give them more responsibility, right? So I'm not saying that you have to do it a certain way in all cases. I'm saying that to understand how we approach. And so you can do these needs assessments, and that's sort of the underlying message is that you can do these needs assessments for almost anything, right? So we're talking about citizen engagement, and we've also talked about homelessness. We've talked about everything, and you can do this across the board, right? And it's just about understanding your population that you're engaging with.
Problem, a potential problem is the same people that are participating now are the ones that will participate at that level. So you're giving the same more power, so the same groups on the fringes more power.
And
so just from, I mean, we do our best to try to engage people, media, surveys, just anything, and it's the same people who keep showing up.
And that's why
a lot of the youth feel like, oh, I'm just going to respond on Facebook if the government sucks or you guys suck. And they count that as their participation. So it's it's an ongoing effort that I'm not going to try to defend the government, but we're always trying to do the new stuff. We're trying to get people more involved. But like what Tim is saying, a lot of people are just like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing my thing.
So one of the arguments in response to that would be that the reason people feel that way is because of the fact that most efforts they've been involved with are very token, right? So it just sort of spins down the toilet constantly.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas if we start creating meaningful experiences for them through citizen engagement, then we're going to get people more engaged and more excited about what we're doing.
Yeah, the homeless shelter process will set back public engagement if we can't help in the city, probably a decade or so. Or it could really wrap it up, right?
Mhm.
I saw a lot of people say they were running for office in Trailer last week.
But I remember, like, one of my bosses sat me down the other day, and or it was a couple months ago, and he says, I'll be interested to see in 20 years if you're still as excited about it as you are now. And it's that attitude, right? Where he's like, through experience, I've seen that citizen engagement is pointless, right? And it's that attitude. But he's not doing anything innovative. He's not actually like pivoting or trying new things. He's been doing the same thing. And right, if you keep hitting your head into the wall, it's not going to change the outcome. So, yeah.
Thanks, God.
So I tried, but I'm gonna have to stop off again. At one point, sorry everyone who wants to go home early and Mario wants to catch his train. At some point, you've got to say, we want all these citizens engaged, and we want a democracy, we want everyone to vote. But even though the city budget gets technical, it gets tricky, gooey, messy, there's a lot of highly technical things going on. The council doesn't even catch up as the finance director is explaining everything going on after hours and hours of meeting. We did a water changeover last year in Riverton.
Like the trade rates or what?
They wanted to know they're changing from our wells to Jordan Valley Conservancy District water because of the hardness of the water. It was so many moving parts, moving pieces. The city engineer worked on it for months and hours and hours of meetings with the city council, and it was still unclear about the future and cost. It was really a technical decision with a lot of unknowns, and they turned it out to a public citizen vote. And I thought, the public is going to look at that. They're going to get a blurb, even if they have the background information. Or if you're going to have 5% of the population that reads the background information, the rest of them, if they look at the little 30-word blurb,
They're just going to say, like, more
Yeah.
taxes.
Yeah,
No.
higher money or less money or whatever.
Yeah, so
And so I see a danger there.
if
That
we,
once you give that power to the people, they demand it, but they're not willing to or able to invest the time to become experts in the situation or the program.
So I've been talking about non-attitudes, right? And so often we're asking people about things that they don't have attitudes about, like you're describing. And so what CCube is, it talks about who's actually participating. It could be that it's some sort of professional person, it's a professional stakeholder who actually understands the problem. So what you can do is what's called deliberative democracy, where you select people to be demographically representative of your population, and then you have them, or you can randomly select them, and then you educate them on the issue, and then you have them deliberate on it and come up with some sort of solution, right? So you have citizens that are representative of your community, and they're educated on the issue, and you would give them money to do this, maybe like $100 a day, something like that. And that's sort of my point with this, is that there's so many different ways that you can do these things to meet your needs, and it doesn't have to be these stereotypical methods that we're always using. Sorry for all the people who aren't in local government. Okay, so I don't want to like ride on this for too long, but does somebody have any more questions? Does that answer your question though? Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm not saying like keep doing it when it's terrible, because what you're describing is what happens, and I'm saying there's a better way.
And I'm afraid of.
You got to get out of the boat and walk on the water.
Yeah, I'm afraid that we're moving towards a log in and vote tonight for our city government type thing. You know, find your whole staff fired and people vote for more services, less taxes.
Yeah. Like Reykjavik.
Yeah.
Do that crazy stuff in Iceland. Okay. Questions? Other questions? Any questions about needs assessments? Is it clearer in your minds what we're doing with the needs assessment? we go back, closed it. So if we go back, right, we're looking at first, what's our problem? How have we designed the solution to that problem? And then how is it actually administered in reality? What are the outcomes of that program? And lastly, is it cost effective? There we go, program evaluation. Yeah. Time to work together in groups.
Yes.
And then I'll just walk around and do my thing. Is that helpful to have me walk around and answer your questions?
Do your thing.
Do my thing.
I just sent it to you.
Oh, you did. Thanks, Lane. Do you think it's lame? You think transition, just saying transition?
It's simple. It's still very representative.
So don't say fine
Doesn't
arts.
give away the punchline. I don't know, that's my thought. I won't profess to be an ask or email or anything.
I know. You would say each.
Unless you don't need it.
So, do you think sincerely? I don't know, I said best to somebody who talked about it. Then I was like researching all of those best regards, especially anything, all the best.
I think with appreciation and gratitude we're fine. Maybe even with appreciation and gratitude.
Do you think that sounds bad? Thank you again for 4 wonderful years.
Maybe a little bit, just kind of saying. It's 4 years and you may be addressing some people who are lifers.
You guys get me?
Hey guys, do you want to talk real quick? Are you already talking? Should we talk, guys?
Okay, Jay.